Thanks, Julia. And what we tried to do, Pitt's experience is unique, but what we tried to capture in our study of the results that we got back from the surveys that we sent out to folks for driving toward a degree is like, what is collaboration, right? Is this general theme, but how could we unpack it in a more tactical way? Or, it's an umbrella term, but how could we sort of, how is it implemented at an institution, right? And I think we identified three key ways in which that is the case. One is setting clear lines of responsibility over student supports, strong communication channels existing between those student support stakeholders, and those student supports being integrated. And these are sentiment-based questions where we ask folks to agree or disagree with these statements. And as you can see at Pitt, whether it's the NICs or, the personalized education or the pathways, each of these could be mapped to one of these three main buckets. And we wanted to be applicable or sort of inclusive of all types of institutions and how these are sort of implemented at any given institution. And so what we determined was that the most collaborative institutions across student supports are the most successful. So just a little bit about the methodology. What we did is we clustered these institutions based on their responses into those institutions that are either here at the bottom least collaborative or most collaborative. And then we compared their collaboration against these three key indicators. As you can see here, those institutions in shades of brown are much more likely to agree with each of these three indicators. They're much more likely to believe that they have clear lines of responsibility, strong communication channels, and that their student supports are integrated. And that is in comparison to those that are least collaborative in shades of gray, which obviously you can see differences in those shading colors, and then sort of in your intermediate in between in terms of where they stand. And then with this data as our hypothesis in terms of, a solution to a problem of holistic student support to this idea of, advisor capacity, we then did a test and said, okay, let's look at 2-year and 4-year institutions, and let's determine based on our hypothesis if your most collaborative institutions have seen the largest increases in retention rates. And the data here reflects that. And so what we capture, I'll start with the 2-year institutions on the left-hand side. On the x-axis is the least collaborative versus most collaborative, those clusters of different institutions. And the different shades of color, whether dark gray or light gray or blue or brown, represent the retention rate as measured in the academic year 12-13 versus as measured 5 years later in 17-18. And what you can see here above each of these two bars is the increase or potential decrease if we go to 4-year institutions in terms of that retention rate. And the broader point here for 2-year institutions is that you can see a quite more significant increase in the retention rate for most collaborative institutions over that 5-year period. For 4-year institutions, you actually had a decrease for your least collaborative institutions and your intermediate institutions, but an increase for your most collaborative institutions. So again, the data is telling us in a statistically significant way, because we wanted to test the significance of these results to make sure there wasn't noise in the data, that those institutions, whether 2 or 4-year, which are most collaborative, have seen the largest increases in retention rates over the past over a period of 5 years.
And Nick, there was a question in the chat that I'll just address directly. The operationalizing collaboration takes on many different forms. That's part of the analytical challenge, the research challenge that exists in measuring the effectiveness of various approaches to student supports redesign efforts. So what we've attempted to do in this study is sort of abstract things just a bit to say, okay, regardless of how you're approaching collaboration, some of them do it through a network improvement community like the one Julia was describing. Others do it through a variety of kind of advising or retention teams or student success teams. And there are a variety of different approaches. All of them have varying levels of fidelity as it relates to implementation of those things. We wanted to try to strip as much of that out of the equation as possible and boil it down to the principles that appear to matter. What we found was that this clear lines of responsibility, clear communication, and integrated student supports were sort of the three descriptors that drive the collaboration, and the collaboration in turn drives improved retention rates at 2x the rate of those that were less collaborative.